Classical Rebellion. Classical Rebellion.
Classical Rebellion.
So Shostakovich is number 7.
Yeah, we're here to talk about Shostakovich tonight.
It's hilarious. One of the most entertaining, lighthearted pieces of music ever played.
Oh yes, known for his comedy, his comedy soundtracks.
Yeah, biting sense of humor, the comedic timing in the Shostakovich.
I mean,
7.
the whole Soviet Union experience from 1917 to 1991 was known for its
lighthearted
comedy.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, it's. I had intended to use a prop actually for this evening's talk because I was born in 1963, well into the LP era, but 78 RPM records, I mean, had been such a popular form of home entertainment through the 19-teens, 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, up until the time that they just disappeared and went to vinyl records almost overnight, within a year or two, and that there was still. I mean, they're still out there. I mean, every thrift shop you go in is going to have some 78s in it, probably. Right. And so I would buy these things because I grew up around them at home, too. We had from my grandparents and things. And I would listen to them and enjoy Glenn Miller, stuff from the 1920s. Mm-hmm. And so I would also buy some of the less usual classical 78 sets and listen to them. And one of the more unusual sets that I had, and which I thought I still had, it may still be around here somewhere, but I can't find it, is the Shostakovich Ninth, recorded by Serge Gusevitsky, which is the third in the 3 symphony cycle that starts with the 7th, 8th, and 9th, the 3 war symphonies.
Okay.
The 7th is the first and the most originally heroic of the 3, because the 8th was social realism written to please Stalin, and the 9th did not please Stalin at all because it was imbued with a character of somewhat cynical ennui and perceptible emptiness of the number of people that were killed in this conflict, and not just by the Nazis, because the Russians killed plenty of their own people in that conflict and before it. And you get a very, it's very perceptible that Shostakovich is talking about, it's a two-edged sword, where he says in a broadcast, the 4th movement is dedicated to our country. It is an immediate continuation of the 2nd and 3rd movements, their logical outcome. It is the victory of light over darkness, wisdom over frenzy, lofty humanism over monstrous tyranny. Now, there has never been on the face of this earth a more monstrous tyrant than Joseph Stalin.
Correct.
But that's one of the reasons, statements like that are what got Shostakovich in trouble with Stalin in the West. So, you have to take these symphonies as a two-edged sword. It cuts both ways. And that's one of the reasons why Shostakovich is I think, the most heroic of the 20th century Soviet composers. It's a miracle that he outlasted Stalin. I mean, Prokofiev died on the same day as Stalin within hours.
Did he really?
Yeah, kind of hard to think that would not have been by design too. But we'll leave that as it may. But Shostakovich outlasted Stalin, but continued to be pressurized by the Soviet regime. But he wrote music of biting insight and occasional sarcasm that is, even in the midst of the war, you have to think there's an element of social criticism going on there, as well as social realism, but social criticism too. So this...
Yeah, well, there's evidence that it was not about Hitler, the 7th. In that it was commissioned before Russia was in the war. And apparently Shostakovich never took a commission that he didn't already have something working on. So there's one school of thought that does say that...
He was already working on it when the Nazis invaded.
Yes, that the 7th was more about Stalin's tyranny initially.
Well, I don't doubt that at all.
Yeah.
I don't doubt that at all. But I mean, it would never have been said in those terms.
Right.
But Shostakovich's wit as a composer, when he blurs his harmonies, Prokofiev is always sardonic. That is his stock in trade. It is his nature. Shostakovich is not always sardonic, and when he gets sardonic, he's definitely making a point. He blurs, like in the opening.
Wait, he's always sardonic, or is not?
No, he's not always sardonic, and when he gets sardonic, he's making a very pointed reference to a dystopian element that he's commenting on.
Right.
And like, for instance, he says that the first movement is about the people living their normal lives under Stalinist dictatorship.
Right.
That right there is a non-starter. But so living their normal lives, and yet as he makes these sort of giant step-like intervals in the opening statements of the thing, and as he starts to develop it, he introduces seconds in the harmonies. So things go out of focus a little bit. There's something not quite lining up here. It's as normal as a monstrous tyranny normality can get.
Right.
So this is Shostakovich commenting on the state of normality. And then it goes from bad to worse,
right?
And then, but I mean, I think there is genuinely something heroic about the fourth movement. It's the march towards their determination. Perhaps what he hoped was going to be a coming freedom, a building towards a coming freedom. That then in the Ninth Symphony we see just didn't happen. Because you see in the Ninth it's very small forces. It's a smaller orchestra. It is the sound of children playing beyond in places you can't see beyond building, because the foreground is completely bombed out, by both sides.
Yeah.
And so it's the seventh is an amazing symphony, and Toscanini and Stokowski fought over who was going to get to give it. And
yes, the American side of propaganda really got a hold of this piece of music.
Oh yeah.
And really you got Shostakovich in his fireman's hat on the cover of Time magazine.
On the roof of the Leningrad Conservatory.
Yeah, putting out fires from the bombing.
Well, I was just listening to the commentary, actually, at the beginning. I never heard that symphony until the Toscanini recording was first released on CD. And I listened to it, but I didn't include the commentary. So in the introductory remarks, the chairman of the American Soviet War Relief Fund, some Bostonian with a very drawling accent like this, and says, one would like to think that perhaps one of our bandages might have been used to bandage the burned finger of a fire watchman on the roof of the Leningrad Conservatory, one Dmitri Shostakovich. And so, I mean, they're pumping it for all they're worth.
Yeah,
We got to make up with Uncle Joe because got to knock down Uncle Adolf.
And composers in the United States didn't all have a good response to that either.
No,
I think it's Rachmaninoff who famously said after he heard it something like, "Well, let's go have some tea."
But that would have been going to the Russian tea room outside Carnegie Hall. So, or Minsky's, one of the two. But no, that's very interesting. But it's not Milton Babbitt. It has structure.
Yeah.
It has rhetoric.
Mm-hmm.
It has the imaginative contrapuntal development of a genuine symphonic work of magnitude.
Okay.
And it's interesting also, on that recording, they announced that the NBC Symphony Orchestra is augmented tonight to the size of 112 musicians.
All right.
Normally, I think it was more or less 90 players, so they've added like 20-some players. And what we're going, I believe, to see tomorrow night to hear is an augmented orchestra right along in those lines.
Yeah.
It possibly bigger. I mean, so.
Yeah. Well, what I wanted to maybe talk about with this is when the program breaks down. So the program is, this is a resistance to Hitler, resistance to fascism, symphony, political statement, and that's the program. But then it turns out maybe it's not about Hitler, it's maybe more about Stalin. And so the story starts to break down, which is why I never really put much credence in the program. I think it's infinitely interesting, the context of the piece of music. But when I'm listening, actually, tomorrow night when I'm listening to it, not one thing, not any of that's going to be in my mind. It's all going to be internalized into my own.
Well, we can listen to it that way now as well, more easily than we could in previously in different before the fall of the Soviet Union. I think it's harder to separate it then than it is now. But
right, but I don't want to keep it. That keeps the music still at a distance to me personally, and it's just not a practice that I find beneficial for myself.
Well,
so I'm going to listen more for the that final movement. Where's the heroism in my own personal context? Where can I step up and be a little more heroic besides just sitting in a chair in a darkened room listening to someone else's heroism?
Well, Shostakovich himself also said that he did not intend any kind of programmatic representation of war.
Right.
He said, I didn't try to imitate cannons or gunfire or anything. That's not in there. So,
Aww.
I know, shucks. Well, at least not in the first movement. Not with the coming of the war. He didn't do that. I think it's perhaps with the clattering snare drum, in the fourth movement, which just drives right through the whole movement as it expands, is more
played by a man who's almost dead. They had to go find. They needed a drummer for the premiere, and the conductor went in desperation to the morgue and found him still barely alive, but he'd been considered dead. The snare drum player.
Really?
Yeah, and they got him. And he barely made it through
because Stalin told him to get up off that slab and get in there.
That, my friends, is a trying time.
Yeah,
we do not live in trying times.
That is a trying. That is definitely a trial.
That's a trying time.
When your dictator tells you to get up off the slab of the morgue and get back to the orchestra. Now, who was the conductor of the premiere? Was it Evgeny Brovansky?
I don't think so.
Or was it Shostakovich himself?
No. I can't remember.
Well, we'll put that in the printed review.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, but it's going to be. This is really a wonderful opportunity to hear this work.
Right.
And quite frankly, and this is not a criticism of the hall. I love Symphony Hall to death, as everybody knows. But a 112 or 120 piece orchestra is going to play better in that hall than 85 pieces.
It's going to be present.
It's going to be very present. Which makes me think, how fun would it be to hear a really large work like the Mahler Eighth or Schoenberg's Gura Lieder, with a 600 voice choir and 140 or 150 pieces in the orchestra.
Yeah, that would have to be a regional effort.
Well, it would, but it would be one worth making.
A performance in San Diego, one in Orange County,
one in LA.
One in LA. Yeah,
but it sure would be a worthwhile undertaking. Gura Lieder, if you've never, we're talking about large scale orchestral works. Mm-hmm. That is as much proof as anyone could ever need of the genius of Arnold Schoenberg. Regardless of how you feel,
Night does it for me.
Regardless of how one feels about his atonalism, because I feel very strongly about it in the negative. Yeah. But if you can write Gura Lieder, okay, go ahead and write whatever you want.
Right.
I'll buy it. I may not like it, but I believe you intended what you were doing.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's part of this whole. I don't know how far we want to get down this road, but there was an Oedipal revolt within Viennese society writ large at the time.
Right.
That's where you've got the bourgeois, the upper class. Everything about their life is false. The letter opener is shaped like a scimitar. Nothing actually nothing actually looks like what it's intended to do. So there's a facade on everything. And so you get an architect like Adolf Loos, who is the founder of form follows function. And they start to try to tear the facade away.
Right.
And you've got Hofmannsthal, who famously wrote the librettos for Richard Strauss's operas. You've got Freud in that time period. You've got Gustav Klimt in that time period. And Schoenberg is basically saying, we don't even want anything to do with your tonality.
Right.
You make us sick. Everything about...
But he sure did a great job on Gura Lieder.
Yeah.
I mean, that is a work of genius.
Yeah.
It is absolutely staggering in its inspiration.
There's one thing I wanted. So, you're going back to, there's a temptation to listen to this Shostakovich Seventh in the context of our, some might say, slide toward tyranny in our country, which I'm not that alarmist. But I do want to confirm to people that you and I differ quite a lot on some of our political views.
No, we don't.
Right. Like there's some things where we differ and we just don't really talk about it because we have so many important things like Shostakovich's Seventh that we do agree on. And I find it really irritating when people within the arts let politics separate the people within the arts that love the arts. It should be people who love the arts, and then whatever their politics are, let them be. Just leave it alone. What's the guy's name? Prager, right? He's been a champion of the radio host, Dennis Prager, and he's invited to conduct the Santa Monica Symphony as a guest as a fundraiser, and he's supported classical music in LA for decades, and he talks about it all the time on his radio show. And that orchestra players tried to rebel against him based on his politics. And I was like, no, this isn't about your politics.
Well, I was just having a conversation earlier today also about it, just to talk about how politicized pretty much everything has gotten, which is really unfortunate because it dumbs down the potential for any kind of abstract expression. Everything has to have a concrete meaning.
Right.
It's saying this. Well, the National Geographic. I was just lamenting the fact that it has become simply, a political mouthpiece. I know so many people who have just let it go. I mean, where is it now? I don't know. I guess we learned really everything about geography and sort of ethnography that it had to talk about because now it's just like spouting opinion, right. and when you translate that over into music and the arts, if all of you're doing is spouting opinion, right. instead of trying to create, whether tonally or abstractly or aharmonically, an abstract intellectual construct. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's fine to apply. Anyone can apply a program to one another thing and say, "Well, this is what it's about to me." Well, that's fine that's what it's about to you, right. But that doesn't necessarily say that that's what it's about. Mm-hmm. It is what it is, and when we've lost the complete, at least in my opinion, when we've reduced arts to one political slant. Yeah. Well, you're on the dying track to. Because politics changes, right? And if the slant doesn't change with the politics, the art form is sidelining itself, and that's pretty much where we are right now. Yeah, that's pretty much where we are.
But I just wanted to bring that up. That even if you
I disagree with you too.
Well, that's fine. That's fine as long as you're polite about it. Respectful. You can respectfully disagree. What happened to that? What happened to that? No one respectfully disagrees anymore.
I know. And my best friend is one of my oldest friend is a diehard Canadian socialist. I mean, I've known him all my life. He's one of the most trustworthy friends that I've got.
It's because he's a diehard Canadian socialist, John.
I couldn't disagree with him more. But I mean. We like hockey.
Yeah.
We go to hockey games together.
Right.
And it's just if you can't find some common ground, I mean, it's you're not trying.
Right. Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and so that's what I wrote initially about Shostakovich's Seventh. Is I don't want to hear anything from anyone about we're on the track to tyranny again, because even Putin is not the same level.
There isn't a Stalin in the world today.
Yeah.
I don't know what
Stalin would have eaten Putin for not even breakfast. He would have just been
dunked him in
midday
his coffee.
Yeah.
No, I mean it's we just don't have that kind of thing going on, and it's actually quite shocking to look back at the 20th century and think that it actually happened, that it could happen.
Yeah.
Because
it did happen.
Because it did happen, and no, I mean it's we agree on that.
Yeah. Yeah. Stay vigilant. Okay, what's that like? What?
All right, I'm watching. What's going to happen?
Yeah.
After as noisy as I have been politically, no one has come looking for me. And
Right.
I guarantee you, if I had lived in Russia in the 1930s,
yeah, you would have been turned in. If you
they wouldn't even have had to turn me in. They would have just come and gotten me.
Right. Not so. You've been not that you would have fallen on the wrong side. I don't know.
No, you just can't. You could not be that politically expressive.
Right.
It's going to get you in big trouble. People kept their mouths shut and tried not to get arrested and sent to a camp.
Forever, though.
Yeah.
Forever in the United States, people, since the founding of the country, people have had a political opinion and have expressed it freely. That is the only place in the world where countries been founded on that and continued in that vein. You couldn't say whatever you wanted in France, especially during the Revolution.
Which is why
the Revolution would go too far past you, and they'd chop your head off, even though you were the one chopping heads off.
Which is why I'm not at the Marriage of Figaro tonight, because quite frankly, I'm not interested in the French Revolution. I have nothing for that.
Yeah.
The terror leaves me terrified, and I'm profoundly glad that I didn't live in it. You want to talk about, the precursors to the 20th century, the murders that happened in the French Revolution? They killed 800,000 in the Vendée, just because they were opposing the regime.
Right.
They disagreed with it. Well, then we're just going to put you on rafts out in the English Channel and set you on fire.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a strange thing.
I have nothing for Beaumarchais.
We take for granted the ability to express a political opinion. Mozart could not express a political opinion. He had to do it via his...
Well, as you pointed out, the aria in the third act
was changed.
Changed from being mad at the aristocracy to being mad at women.
Yeah.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah.
Sure it does. So, no, which is not to say that, the Marriage of Figaro is not an opera worth doing. It's just like, I would have liked to have had something to follow on from it, at some point. It's in the last 200 years. There's no Mozartian successor in that way. I mean, I really don't. I mean, Rossini is fun. But Mozart is more significant as a musician.
Yes.
And I think it's a drum that has been banged incessantly because it is an incredibly clever piece. Yeah. But its political point, I think, is somewhat passé.
Well, abuse of power is never going to be passé until it stops happening. And so I can see that.
Well, it's never going to stop happening entirely.
Yeah.
But as we were just saying,
it's not.
It has never happened here the way that it has happened in Germany, in Russia, and in China.
Right.
But those things are not happening right now.
And in Italy, and in England, and, England not...
Well, not on that scale, but yes.
But, concentration camps started during the Boer War in South Africa. The British are the ones who invented those things.
Yes, there was a difference between a concentration camp where you concentrate large numbers of people and an extermination camp.
Yes.
Which is also what the entire Gulag system basically was. Very few people ever actually came back.
Oh, no.
The fact that Solzhenitsyn came back after doing his tenor, as they used to call it, a 10-year stretch, is remarkable. And he almost didn't. He could easily have just given up. It was only, because he didn't give up in the face of, the atrocious abused. I mean, they were just literally worked to death.
Yeah. Well, and Dostoevsky, we're getting off on a tangent here, but
Yeah, we are.
He also went to Siberia. It wasn't quite the same, but it was similar. And he came back no longer a humanist, no longer a rational humanist, but saying only a miracle wrought by God will save us, because he'd seen who was in those. He'd seen the level of, I don't know what you want, of humanity. And
or lack thereof.
And he did not see rational humanism making a dent in what was happening there. And so he came back a devoted Orthodox, yeah. And he still doubted, obviously. He expresses his doubts via his characters in his books. Definitely, but you can't... Well, we're sitting in comfy chairs.
Yes, I was just... But, I mean, I guess a way to wrap that up is that... given all of those factors, it comes back to highlighting something of the personal heroism of Shostakovich as a composer of integrity and originality under incredible. I mean, who was it? Was it you that was telling me that who has said that no great art has ever been produced except for political pressure? You know, so the abuse of power frequently results in worthwhile expressions and lasting monumental expressions of artistic integrity.
Right.
Well, Shostakovich is one of the best examples of that in the 20th century.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's why American art isn't at the same level. Our artists haven't been oppressed politically. Whatever you want to express it. There's no one that's ever said no.
So if American classical composers are really looking for, inspiration, they shouldn't object to the slide towards tyranny so much.
That's true. That would improve.
It's only for your own good. I'm just saying.
It would improve
because you can't have it both ways. I don't know. I'm content to live off
in a comfy chair.
in my comfy chair and off Europe and Asia's suffering for the sake of my artistic inspiration. But it's the double-edged sword. It cuts both ways.
Yeah.
So I would prefer not to have to live in tyranny, and we don't. But I think that were it to ever happen, and I really hope to hell that it doesn't, that's probably when we're going to see the rebirth of classical expression. A substantial classical expression out of the crucible of suffering. But kind of like St. Augustine, say, Lord, make me good, but not yet. Right. Make me a good composer, but not yet. Yeah. With
a lack of adversity, art becomes what it's become.
Which is basically
it's expression. It's an expression.
A fawning tool of a political slant.
Yeah.
And which eventually debases itself further and further towards simplicity until it becomes banal and anesthetized and without significance.
Yeah.
But not my compositions, because I wrote... No, I mean, I did have a performance this weekend, and I'm pleased to say that, I was part of a significant church service this weekend, which demanded the presence of some classical, art of the Renaissance. We did the Lassus Requiem for Five Voices, circa 1680, and when we did this 10 years ago, I wrote a Libera Me setting in falso bordone, alternating homophony and chant, or polyphony and chant, and it got another outing this weekend, and perhaps I struck some small blow for the classical rebellion.
Yes, right. We good?
I think we're good.
We're good.
Go to the Shostakovich.
Yes.
Enter the crucible of suffering.